And, that absence of having, something regular to go to after school, you really felt it. But you also felt that the community organizations that existed made a difference because they gave you something to aim for. They did involve your families and they helped put me on the path, particularly the Rotary Club involvement. I got small grants, just as PCS is doing. So taking advantage of educational opportunities. Friends and neighbours pitched in, they'd pay for my bus and my train fare, to go to an interview for something, or they'd tell me about opportunities. And I became very much aware that it does take a community to get, a kid to move forward, particularly in an environment where you've had, this post-industrial decline and socioeconomic dislocation. And definitely Portland has had that experience as well. Plus Portland has had this amazing open arms, like most of Maine, to refugees and, people who, have really had hard times elsewhere. I mean, you've been, one of the few communities that's really been bringing people in as well. And now you have a much more, diverse population and community than before. And so I was just impressed right from the beginning that, kind of Barrett and everybody else here have been, hitting exactly the things that I, in my own personal experience, realized, well, what it took to get me forward from, the daughter of a coal miner who'd lost his job with what looked like very little opportunity, to, basically having the educational doors opened up for me and then being able to kind of move on and, hopefully at some point be able to give something back. What's also great about Portland is that you're telling everybody that there is something for you here. People don't have to leave. I mean, the fact, Barrett, that you're doing something within a community that you love, that you're not going off and doing this in New York or, somewhere else, kind of on the biggest stage, but you're showing, to people that you can take this nationally and that a, relatively small community like Portland that, many people have heard of and, that really has a kind of a history to it can achieve something like this. I think, this particular point of so much dysfunction in our politics, so much polarization, partisan infighting, and where, we can't see our members of Congress getting anything done. The fact that your community could pull together from people from all kinds of disparate backgrounds and show that you could do something that's meaningful for kids. And Barrett, as you're saying now, having your first cohorts going off to college or off to, apprenticeships, training, off to the next stage of their lives. I mean, people need to hear about this, and you've got a formula that works. I mean, every single person, on the Zoom screen has really played a role here. And I've been talking you up all over the place because, this is a pilot program that's had real effects for the community, but can be shown, to other communities. You could do this too. And as you've said, with looking at Maine overall, it doesn't have to be squash. It could be performing arts. It could be any other sport. It could be any other kind of cultural and educational focal point. But you've got a model that could be transferred into other settings as well. Anyway, I'm super impressed. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you, Fiona.
Look, I wish the only thing, Barrett, that I'd picked up the envelope earlier from bookings, because we weren't allowed in the building for a long time, because then I could have featured you, in the last section of the book, because it was really the kind of thing that I, with myself, trying to grapple with. How would you do, kind of something that would really, get a community going to help, revitalize and regenerate itself. And, I had a couple of examples there, but I mean, you guys are doing it. You're doing it in real time.
Let's go to Todd.
I'd love to know how you pivoted from, your historical areas of focus, the foreign policy and Russia stuff to these issues of civil society, for lack of a better way to describe it. I'm very curious about that.
And I, kind of started, because I was studying Russia and working on Russia for so long, I saw always the linkages between the domestic policy and outcomes in Russia and, the foreign policy perspective. But I saw it, kind of in real time in 2016 about how our domestic dysfunction and, these, feelings of lack of opportunity and grievance that have been kind of building up could become a national security crisis. Because what the Russians did in 2016 in their intervention in our politics and in our presidential campaign was to just sow discord, sort of fuel the flames of, fires that were already burning and, help Americans get pitted against each other. And, I feel that our polarization, the partisan infighting has really become a national security crisis. On the first instance, it can be exploited from the outside, and that's what the Russians did. But at the same time, it's also preventing us from having collective action. And so we need demonstration effects. There's also a line, from Pipes's Russia Under the Old Regime, which he taught the same lecture over and over and over again. So you might remember that from his lecture. where there's a kind of a paragraph about Russia in 1905 on the eve of the 1905, the first Russian Revolution. And it talks about how everybody hated each other and how everybody was pitted against each other across the whole of the Russian Empire. And that, it's on the left, on the right, everybody's, kind of calling each other names and, kind of launching pogroms and riots, and the whole place was up in flames. And that's kind of how it feels, right now in the United States. And people are looking for something. They're looking for something to show, hang on, we don't have to do things like this. And as I said, if our Congress people and men and women can't bring it about, or, even within one political party, they can't seem to kind of, work together in any way, how can we show people that it's possible, to kind of move forward on a totally different basis? Where can we have a shared mission, or a kind of a sense of all being part of something? Because what the Russians were trying to do in 2016 was make us lose faith and trust in each other, not just in our electoral system, but in the kind of idea of America. And America has always been founded on opportunity, right? And having the opportunity to have a job, to get ahead, to have a family, to have a home, to have an education, and to be able to participate in something. And America has always been fantastic at organized sports and larger participation, and our civics have come out of that. And all the way along, I've always been very interested in these issues. I've experienced them personally, but I've looked at them in Russia too. I mean, one of the reasons that Russia hasn't ever made it on the democratic states is because they've stifled independent innovation, but also collective action, on those, kind of smaller scales. And so I think it was kind of a bit of an easy leap, but it was also because of my experiences of going through, the first impeachment and, the testimony, and, realizing that we were really in trouble.
Thank you.
But it's this kind of community spirit that we need to, basically get engaged in and try to take it up to the national level and say, look, if people in Portland, Maine, and the whole state of Maine can do this, okay, Maine is a special place, let's just say it that way, but it can be replicated.
Part of the thesis that we have now is that we already have the infrastructure. It's a pay-to-play infrastructure, but we were talking about this on the call today. We have 61 youth-serving organizations around the city that are privately operated, serving students that can pay their way. But using the arts and sports, that's really the place, the hours after school and after work, that integration needs to happen. It's one of the only times we have. So it's about bringing our values of access, equity, and integration into an already existing infrastructure that's prepared to serve more students, wants to serve more students, but just doesn't have the vehicles to necessarily do it yet. So
yeah, you give me coherence is what you're doing here. And I mean, I think, look, I think we've seen that things that grow up from the grassroots organically, where people are really dedicated to it, work the best. Mm-hmm. When you try to do something from the top down with the heavy hand, people usually feel uncomfortable about it. They're not invested in it. They don't feel like that they've got a stake. And as you said, there's 61, organizations, one way or another, already there, joining them together in some fashion. Right. Without stifling them is the way to go, because, again, the Soviet Union and Russia, they stifle everything. They don't let the, kind of people flourish in doing it on their own. They try to kind of come in. And I mean, that's the only risk, is that, your own innovative, kind of spirit gets stifled a bit, because, you don't want to create too much process and, kind of bureaucracy around things. But you want to instead, as you're saying, give kids a choice, so that every single school kid in Maine, if they really want to, or in Portland, kind of as a starting point, can have something after school that they can participate in.
A place for their entire family too. I think that's one
exactly. Their family can be part of it too.
Trying to get our organizations to evolve their thinking from youth development into community development. So
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people can really do with a kind of inspiration that you're providing as well, because you're really trying to do something and you're succeeding at it. And as you said, it's not that long in terms of time, from 2016 to 2021, and just the vision of everybody here on this Zoom call, and of stepping up to the plate. It's not just talking about something, but doing something. I mean, that is really just an extremely important message. And it's not political. It's not kind of, you're politically engaged in the sense you're trying to bring about some larger social and community change, but there's nothing partisan or ideological about it. What's not to like about squash? But bringing in all of the families and, kind of really community building from, the kind of the bottom up through this portal of squash. I mean, again, it's inspirational, but it's also replicable. that this is a kind of a blueprint for things you could do on other fronts.
Well, I think I speak for everyone to say thank you for inspiring us today and giving us the energy to go do the work on the ground.